right. I got another special guest with us today for season 4, episode 4. I want to thank James Lewis for coming on here and it's going to be a very vulnerable conversation today. We want to talk about higher being, and we're going to tie that into how we can better lead young men of this generation today. So before we get started, James, how have you been? How's your mental health been these days? Before we get started with the topic, and you can kind of introduce yourself too.
Yeah, thank you for asking, Ron. I mean, overall, it's been amazing. Just because I've gone more insular. So yeah, I mean, you introduced me. I'm James. Some people know me online as at the real fail forward. There's some additional context to putting real there. And so just because I feel like a lot of times we're not getting real feedback or real representation of people, and I never want that to be the case for myself, just throughout my entire life. And so, you know, I'm the founder of Fail Forward. Any founder will tell you they don't find anything on their own. So, of course, I do have a team, beautiful wife, beautiful family, lots of support, that are really behind me with the mission to change the narrative around the word failure. And so that is the mission, right? How many people do you know pitching failure?
Oh, you can't tell me anything about failure. I've been through the lows of the lows, had so many different jobs, so many different businesses that failed, things that, opportunities that, for the show that was supposed to happen but never actually happened. And it's been a lot of, trials and tribulations for myself. I've been, I kind of grew up in poverty. I didn't really have a father figure to really look up to. And I had to really learn how to be, a man, by myself. Obviously a woman. I had a great mother, but
Mhm.
a woman can't really teach a man how to be a man, right? Like that's
That's
something
right.
that, you know, you have to kind of discover and, have other guy friends for. Um, and speaking of that, like, could you give us a little bit more information about your, company and what you do? And then we'll kind of get into the topic today here.
Absolutely. So, Fail Forward came about. So I thought, as a coaching company, to help individuals and organizations change the narrative around the word, the idea, failure, right? It's putting failure in the context of being a verb, something you should be doing often in order to move forward in the direction you're called to, as opposed to having it be a noun, which is a label and an identity that we wrap ourselves in, and it causes us to be stuck. And so initially, I truly thought that God put this on my heart just for others, but I had my own seasons and cycles of um, failures, right? That were very difficult. And it wasn't until more recently where I realized that the message was for me too. It was the constant reminder to keep pushing forward through failure after failure after failure, because they're just small F's most of the time, right? I call them small F's because we're still here, right? You pointed out how you grew up, the challenges, and we have some similar challenges just in what you've shared, by the way, even in different cities. And that's what I love about these types of conversations and a platform to do that, because what we learn is we may look different, we may sound different, our bank accounts may be different, but at the end of the day, we just two brothers here that probably have a lot more in common that we wouldn't know if we weren't willing to talk about it. So Fail Forward is about creating that platform. It does a lot of times start behind the scenes, right? Because it's not easy to talk about the things that are tough, particularly as men. But my clients are as young as 18 and as senior, we'll say, at 62. And so the 18-year-old plus male has a similar problem, challenges, whatever you want to call them, like things they went through, overcame, as someone who is older than you and I, right? But at the same time, we're never given permission or an opportunity to process it. And so that's our demographic. We're not serving the women out there that reach out, right? but we are hyper focused on the men who, I don't want to take away from any questions that you might be asking, but, I'll just say this. If you've seen the video on Instagram, when was the last time as a man you were asked, what makes you happy? I don't care what a man looks like, what his walk of life is. If I was a gambling man, 90% of us would say we've never been, because we were taught how to provide, or we were told that what we needed to do was be there for others, but we weren't given permission to be there for ourselves, you know? And so we
Yeah.
usually find that out when we have what felt like we failed. And the world shines the light on our imperfections. And then we have to get clearer on who we are so we can move past it. But sadly, a lot of us don't. And you pointed that out, in the beginning, where some of us take our lives, right? Some of us just do harm to others, unfortunately, as a result of having been hurt ourselves. And we, don't really change that until sometimes many moons later. But Fail Forward is really that space where I believe, from the executive to the young man who has no idea where he's going, I can sit down with them and we can process it together and collaborate, as long as they're willing to do the work, and they will change their view on the word failure.
Yeah.
So God could transform my life from a poor kid from Baltimore who wasn't white enough or black enough, even though I grew up in a community where it was clear I was a minority with everybody else, but I went to school as the minority with everybody else who didn't look like me. And I sit here today with all that God has blessed me with. I'm gonna be honest. If he'll do it for me, he'll do it for you. I truly believe that. And so, yeah, that's Fail Forward. It's bigger than me, but I'm grateful to be here as the person able to talk about it.
Yeah. And, I want to commend you for starting something that's going to change lives because, you know, it's a lot of selfish people in the world. And I used to be a very selfish person too. I used to always think, how can I serve myself and how can I do the things that's going to benefit me? But after so long, as you get out of your 20s, you got to really figure out things better for your life. You want to treat people better. You want to, have a positive outlook on life. And it's a lot of the young brothers, they still in their 40s and their 50s, and they're still acting really childish, or they're still acting like, they don't have any responsibilities. Um, I know a lot of times men, you know, they have these conversations that just be, it really is pointless sometimes, like, what am I doing with my life? Like,
Right,
you know, they have these conversations with their homeboys and they just say, like, a lot of times they just sitting around, just laying on the couch, still living with their mom, just, all these different aspects of men. That's not really what the definition of a man is supposed to be. And so I say all that to say, what was your childhood, upbringing like? What did you have to kind of endure to get to where you're at today?
man. You went deep, Ron. So, but I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it because I think that there's value in both directions, the person sharing and the person listening, right? And
Mm,
so, thank you for that. So, here's the thing: I grew up modestly in Baltimore City, West Baltimore, by the way. Everybody knows West Baltimore by two core definitions of time, right? And they are The Wire and Freddie Gray. And I grew up right there in the heart of it, right? And so, um, it was hard. It was my mom worked 2 3 jobs. God rest her soul. She passed away in 24 in the summer, but she worked her butt off to make sure that I had an education, because she grew up at a time where education was truly the privilege of others that didn't look like her. And she had to work as opposed to go to school. And she didn't want me to have to work as hard. And so that meant church 5 6 days a week. That meant, she worked, a regular job and then worked in the evening and took me with her. I was a latchkey kid, right? Because once I got old enough, it was like, you can take the bus, you can handle it. We had a good network. I lived in a co-op, which was more like an apartment with 8 different units, and we were on the ground floor, and they looked out for me, right? They were, my neighbors were my overseers. As you've heard us say, it takes a village. I thank God for the village. Um, and I thank God for the men in church that looked out for me. But I was angry, man. I'm gonna be honest with you because the environment I was in was fight or flight. Like I said, I didn't really fit in socioeconomically, demographically, across the board. And so it was fight or flight. And I didn't even realize how angry I was. You know what I mean? Like I was getting in trouble from a place of anger. But I guess that's unfair for me to leave it there without telling you I'm adopted,
Mhm.
right? So I was adopted by a single Black woman who raised me as a single Black woman, not to take away from, you know, I did have some male influence in my life, which I don't want to miss the opportunity to point out one in particular, because that's super important. But it wasn't until, I had someone who was like my dad growing up, truly. They lived separate. I found out as an adult that they did date, but I never saw it. But he was truly a dad figure, right? And then at 16, something happened. He was no longer in that role. And I started to get in trouble. Um, Again, at the time, not understanding the connection, that absence now of someone who was there since I was 3 or 2, not being there. But man, the way God works, I can't wait to talk a little bit about faith. God is constantly orchestrating a plan that's so much bigger than us. And
Mhm.
that's not me preaching. I'm here as someone who didn't think I'd make it to 18. And now I'm in my 40s. And so I literally am a living testimony to when God looks out, because I have a mentor who's been my mentor since I was 16 years old, getting in trouble right when, that dad figure stepped out. I had a guidance counselor, Miss Kane, who went to my mom and was like, James is smart. He's getting in trouble, not because he's not smart, but because he's bored.
Mhm.
Linked me with the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. They had a program at the time: go to high school, go to college. They match you with a fraternity member. It was other Black men, and the rest is really history. From the sense of Mr. J, just to give him his anonymity, is a man I look up to. I aspire to make as much impact, even beyond just one person. I would not be here if it wasn't for that relationship. I wouldn't be sitting in the position I'm in. I may not even still have the heart, to want to impact to the same level if I didn't have that experience being impacted. So I know it's a little bit of a long answer. It's a little emotional for me because, Toni Morrison said it better, right? The cost of freedom is paying it forward.
Mhm.
So, that's what brings me here. I can't 100% in a 30-minute, time frame give you all the details, but let me tell you, there have been a lot of turns where there were cliffs, and I was fortunate, to just miss the cliffs, right? And so it really comes from a place of humility. I mean that. Those aren't just words. But growing up had its challenges, and I had it better than a lot of people that were around me, right? But it was still hard, man. And I'd say the result of my childhood was working through some real anger, man. Because my mom was angry at times, right? She didn't complain one time in my entire life. I never heard her complain, and it was hard, right? But she had a thing about her. It was the angry Black woman that wouldn't like lash out just for the sake of lashing out. It was to protect, right?
Mhm.
And I grew up with that, not realizing just how much it was impacting me as a man, which, as we know, there is no room in this world for an angry Black man. So I obviously had to learn that the hard way at times. I say obviously because I know the whole story, right? But I know I'm not alone. So anyway, longer answer than you probably bargained for, but thank you for letting me go through it.
No, that's is always it's always interesting to hear men tell their journey from where they came from to where they're going to, because it's going to be setting up for what we're going to be talking about today. And basically, you mentioned a lot about if you didn't have that one person that was there for you,
Mhm.
you wouldn't be where you're at today. So speak a little bit about that, that story, and then we'll get into the topic here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. You know what? I don't know if you've heard the saying, favor isn't fair,
Mm,
right? Sometimes you find favor with people, with organizations, with communities, and you may not deserve it in the moment, but you need it. And in truth, I led up to that a little bit where I was in high school. I, was getting in trouble, and my mentor, Mr. J, he stepped in and honestly just first as a tutor, like as a presence, as a black man who was successful, that I respected, seeing what I saw, but not truly understanding the story behind the man, right? And he was really smart, is really smart. He's an engineer. So math was where I was getting in trouble with teachers, that was leading to my guidance counselor getting those notes, right? And so that's how we got aligned, because he's an engineer, nuclear engineer, right? And so he would tutor me on Saturdays, right? Think about that, 6 days a week now in class, right? But he would wrap it into, let's grab a burger, grab some fries, and watch Saturday football, right? And he's from Michigan, so don't hold it against him. As an Ohioan, he went to University of Michigan, so as you know, that's a big deal when it comes to Saturday football. So
Mhm.
he made it fun, and I liked math, but now I got to experience it with someone I liked. I didn't like my math teacher, and I couldn't relate to my math teacher. I'll say it that way. And so here I could relate to someone, and so my ears were now open because he was listening to me. And in the process of that, he asked me a question. He said, "What you want for your life?" And I looked at him and I was like, "Well, you have the Mercedes, you have the boat." I didn't outline it exactly like this, but I basically said, "I want what you have," right? You're married, you're happily married, your children, like the house.
That was
He has,
really bold.
what's that?
That was really bold. I want what you have.
Well, because I believe success leaves footprints, Deron. We just choose to chart our own path instead of simply walking in the footprints that are already in front of us. And brother, that's not, we need permission that it's okay. Like if you see what I have and it piques your interest, you don't have to take it from me. You
Mm.
could just ask me, and I'm actually willing to tell you, because I want you to be up too. I want you to win too. Like there are plenty of people out there who share that. And I was fortunate enough, and still am fortunate enough, to have him in my life. And so when I said that, he asked me a question. He said, "Okay, so what's your plan?" That was the most powerful question of my life, because I had no plan, because I didn't plan to live to 18.
Mm.
So when he asked me, I was like, boom, light bulb goes on. And I'm like, all right, well, let me just start with what I want. I want the woman, I want the house, I want the career, I want the car. And he said, "Okay, how are you going to get there?" And I said, "I'm going to do better in school." He wanted me to answer the question. He didn't tell me what to do. And then he saw me working and towards it. And then the result of that, I'll be honest, anybody who has a mentor, a coach, a therapist, right, a parent at some point, when they see who they're seeding into taking it seriously, what do they do in return? They pour in more. So there's a duality to the relationship. It's not one-sided. A mentee can't just raise their hand and not high five their mentor in return. You see what I'm saying? They have to do both, right? And so um, there would be no James Lewis without a Mr. J. And I only hope, to some extent, that my sons are able to say the same for me. So it matters to me that other men have whatever good I have to give. And to see somebody who didn't need to do that, he has his own kids, he has taken me in, not like in any way competition with his own kids or anything like that, but just in a way his wife has bought in to him pouring into me. She's poured into me. These are people that are truly extensions. I'm an extension of their family. I am family. And so that's emotional for me, because real recognize real. So I'm here and super blessed as a result of having someone be willing to do that. So
Yeah. And that's a wonderful story to hear because, we need more people that's going to uplift and help each other in this world. We live in a very capitalistic, selfish society, and a lot of people think about themselves. And I will admit, I used to think about myself a lot, and I used to do a lot of bad things that was not good for my soul, and used to have really evil thoughts and things of that nature. But God will do he will do a 360 real quick. He will humble you, he will let you know, he will put people in places that you would never even thought to be there at that particular time in your life to change your life around. And so I want to take the direction into how has God worked in your life or your inner circle to change things for the better when you see things that was getting worse for you. And then we'll get right into we'll tie that into how you're now mentoring people. So
Yeah, no. So I'm gonna give you the short version. I'm gonna start from like 60% instead of going back, right? God
mhm.
brought me to my knees. I take it a step further and say he brought me to my face. My face was in the mud. I had made it to the mountain and I was too blind to see my arrogance, right? Along that initial path to success, we'll say. And sometimes the fall can be so hard that it knocks you out, but not to the point where you don't have an ability to see and experience all the pain in the process of being brought down. And for me, it was professionally, and then immediately after that, I got a divorce. So again, I won't say anything bad about my ex-wife. She's a sister. She's the mother of my sons. But I'm gonna keep it real with you. People are very strategic in your low moments to try to go ahead and capitalize on whatever it is that is important.
Mm.
And I
Ain't that the
almost
truth?
Yeah, and I almost lost my sons, but when I think of the goodness of Jesus and all he's done for me, you don't need anybody else. So even when it don't look like you should be in the same room, you should have the same privileges, you should receive blessings because people paint your faults a certain way. Nope, the Lord looked out, ended up with custody of my sons, etc. But that, my brother, that was a challenge that almost broke me because not having a father growing up and feeling like I wasn't going to get to father my sons when I wanted to, right, was scary to me. It scared me, right? Because I was used to success and being able to do, and I knew my commitment, but I had to let go and let God. And anybody who's ever been in a situation where no matter what you thought you could control, you were reminded this is not about you. This is not about you being able to control it. You have to yield yourself. You have to submit and surrender yourself to that higher power, right? It's hard for us as men to surrender, especially as an alpha male. It's hard for us, right, to admit when we're wrong. It's hard. But I am so grateful that right around that age of 30 that I experienced that because God has helped me to experience not just me, my family. I'm remarried. I no longer have just two sons. I have 5 children, which is 4 sons and 1 daughter. He made me a better man as a result of that challenge. And I get to tell the real story about how God restored me better, even with a scarlet letter. You know what I'm saying? Like that story people need to hear because how many of us got scarlet letters? Oh, quite a few. You know what I mean? But we hide them, right? Because we think I wrote this down. I wrote this down, right? Because I wanted this to be uplifting, right? And the confidence blueprint is a foundational framework I use, okay? Which includes faith, forgiveness, fortitude, and fellowship. But hear me out. Your story explains where you have been. Your standards determine where you're going. But the
Mm.
prerequisite in between that statement is faith. Because if you have no faith attached to your story and you have no faith attached to your standards, you are lost and you are just meandering through life. It has to
Going
stop.
whichever way the wind blows.
Yep. And we know biblically, I'm not going to go scripture wise, but it's in the word, but we know the importance of knowing who our God is, right? And I say all of this to say not for feel good only or sound good only. No. At my lowest point, if my mother didn't seed in to the importance of faith and God and Jesus, I would have probably killed myself. And I'm saying that on camera because as men, we don't talk about the lowest of lows for us, right? Because it doesn't paint us in the best light. What? You would have done that? Well, I felt like I was losing everything, not just myself, but the people I loved. And if I didn't have a higher power, if I didn't have that relationship, even though I wasn't honoring it at the time, but it was in me, it was in my heart, right? My mother poured that into me from a very young age and throughout my entire childhood. I was able to go deeper and submit and yield myself. And I thank God for building me back up, but not just for me, obviously for my loved ones, but also for others who can see it and be like, hey, brother, how'd you do it? And then I get to bring it full circle back around and be like, you can too, right? You can too. You know what I'm saying? The good book is still the good book, brother. It's still the good book. So,
Yeah, and and I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that story because, mothers are the pillar of, the community. They carry a lot of things that they wouldn't even tell their own children about. And, it's it's unfortunate that we have to go through a lot of life circumstances that kind of leads us, but sometimes, you know, there's no there's no test without a testimony, right? Like you got to go through the trials and the tribulations and you got to go through the huddles because once you get to on that other side, you will understand why you had to go through everything you've been through. You know, everything that all the challenges that I've been through in my life is because it led up to a certain point to this day.
mm-hmm,
I wouldn't be here, had I not solved my anger problems. I would not be here if I would have solved my addiction problems. I talked about all this on my past seasons of this talk show. I wouldn't be here because it wasn't ready. Then it was not ready for me to be here. Now it's ready for me to because I'm here to share the stories that I've been through so I can help other men. And so we like to always come full circle about that. So now I want to tie this into the last, maybe 10 or 15 minutes here. I want to tie this up into a nice little bow here. So I want to know how now has your relationship with God allow you to kind of help other people or even your own children in your life? Was there some particular story that maybe you didn't understand when you was a child, but you can pour guidance onto other young men or, such as your son? Is there any particular life story that maybe you've been through in your own life, that you was growing up that maybe you can part wisdom into your own son now, since you are a man of God?
yeah. I made this video decades over dopamine. You got to put in the time. Time is time is the great equalizer, right? You have to put in the time. You got to put in that work. That applies to your relationship with God. If you don't spend time in the word won't be in your heart, which means as you go through life, the world will be your guiding light as opposed to the word. And in my lowest moments, oh my God, like, my mom, I thought my mom was giving up, right? She had been in the hospital a long time. This was just before she passed. And so I asked her, I mean, I'm her oldest son, right? And really her most present son. I was her support, etc. I'm like, Mom, are you giving up? She hit me with a scripture. She didn't say yes or no. And there's a reason why I share this. It was in First Corinthians. It was be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. And I haven't even put the video out on that yet. But what she was telling me was James, my soul is right with God. So
Mm,
whatever his plan is for my life, I'm okay with it. She didn't say that. And at the moment, as her son, looking at my mother suffer, in my mind, I didn't get it. It wasn't until she passed where I was sitting across the street on the bench from where I grew up, right? And God put that on my mind and in my heart. What I would say to my sons is that there is no greater resource than Jesus Christ.
mm,
No matter how much money I leave you or that you make, no matter what status you reach, the one thing you should take with you everywhere is Jesus. Which is why I wear this chain. If you look at the videos, I don't wear it because it's blinged out. Yes, that's how it started 20 something years ago when I had it made. I mean, I'm half my life ago I bought this chain, right? So it has significant meaning to me and it sits over my heart. You understand what I'm saying? Because it's my reminder everywhere I go, I need to take less of me in terms of an ego and more of him. And so to my sons and to any man and to any person, I would say, you don't have to have it figured out, but you do need to take who does have it figured out with you everywhere that you go. Because I can't be with my kids all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't. I have to accept that any parent who has anyone they care about who's vulnerable, they know you can't be with them all the time. But you know what you can do? You can encourage them to take this with them everywhere that they go. So that would be my advice. Obviously, I have some worldly advice as well, which
And
is
that's the Holy Bible, brother, right?
that's the Holy Bible, brother. It's the King James version. Y'all keep grabbing it. I'm sorry I didn't say that, but yeah, it's the Holy Bible. But from a personal stance, beyond that, that's enough. But if I took it a step further, I made another video, and some videos, you know how it is, man. Some episodes they speak to you even more sometimes, right?
Mhm.
So one of those videos for me, I have a green hat on backwards, and I talk about for young men. I said there are 3 D's to avoid: debt, bad debt, of course, divorce, and duty. Don't have a child before you're ready to actually uphold the responsibility, because all you do is contribute to the problem. And that's not fair to the child, it's not fair to the world, and it's not fair to yourself. So those are the 3 D's, right? Because the devil, as we know, and I'm again not preaching, just keeping it real, right? Because when you're in a low moment, you have to be empowered about what you believe. The devil's job is to steal, kill, and destroy, and he leads with distraction. That's why you have to take the word of God with you everywhere you go. Because the moment where that distraction is coming, you got to have something in your heart that goes to your mind and allows you to understand. Nope, not a part of the plan. Just a moment. Small f, small fail, right? Big F's will be in heaven. If it takes us out, that's where we'll be. So don't stress about the big F's as much as we do. Look at the small F's for what they are, which is just learning opportunities. So anyway, that was long-winded, brother, but I need my sons to walk through this world knowing that Jesus is all they need, right? Above all else, and to take it with them. Everything else is secondary.
Mhm. And then my final two questions here that I'm gonna lead you with, and they're gonna be really deep. So just take some minute to think to really, think about it before you answer here, because I always want authentic, real answers, and I know I'm gonna get that from you. Um, has there ever been a time in your life where you know you just wasn't really happy with your life, but you had to go through the emotions of being happy anyway, just for the
Um,
sake of being, just for the sake of you know your own family and your own sanity?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like more recently. I'm in Phil Forward full time, brother. So, and that's a whole nother explanation to kind of go into. So it was a bit abrupt when you're an executive or, in leadership corporately, et cetera. And, and so it's probably for another episode, but I've been unhappy for an extended period of time. And I shared with you, I'm remarried. In my first marriage, and I have to admit this, because it's just so true, and I just didn't see it at the time. I was so alpha that I didn't really treat my first wife like a partner. And obviously that's damaging. And as they say, hindsight's 2020. But I don't want to repeat that, right? And so being unhappy at work, being fortunate enough to do well enough to where I'm able to take care of the family as well, and so on and so forth, I began to have conversations with my wife about how unhappy I was and how unfulfilled I was. And instead of just talking at her, I began to ask her questions around what her thoughts were about the situation. And that was really hard for me. I'm being honest because, that wasn't my natural place to go to. And I knew it, but I also have responsibilities to my family. And I see more clearly that a true partner is there with you through the highs and the lows. So you need to meet them in that partnership as a partner, and not just make all the decisions because you're given the latitude to, right? Honoring that latitude is remembering and treating them as a partner. And that was growth for me, but it's been somewhat of a miserable year until the last 72 hours, I'll say, without being too specific, where I'm no longer in that situation. And I was paid well, but at the same time, the man is not greater than the mission. So the mission will go on.
Mm.
Like you said, right? Like you said, hey, you weren't ready before, right? God had to position you before he brought you here through some other things. And that was essentially so learning how to not be happy and push through when you're at a level that most people would call you crazy, to stand on your values and walk away. I was able to do it. And, praise be to God, praise be to, I'm be honest with you. I love my wife, shout out to Mrs. Lewis, because she fed that confidence, right? Fed that faith and encouraged me. But it's been pretty unhappy for like the last year, to keep it real with you. And it's been the same time that Fail Forward has been growing. So I thank God for that parallel. I'll say it that way, because I get to see meaningful work with meaningful people alongside something that I wasn't happy about, but I was going to continue to do. But as they say, when you pray for something, sometimes God will give you exactly what you pray for. I prayed for clarity. Oh, he gave me clarity. He repositioned me.
It's not a denial, it's a delay.
My man. That's right. That's right. So,
And then my last question is, where can people find you at? Like social media, what projects is coming up next? Or because men always reach out to me and ask me, like, how can I get more help besides the men that, that we bring on the show? Like, we always try to, have guests to come on to share some of their testimonies and things of that nature, and businesses they're going through. So if we can't get through somebody, there's always some of our guests that can be able to get through somebody. Where can they find you? How can they reach out to you? Such as that, such as those
yeah.
things.
Yeah, thank you. So our website is going to be the best way. You can become a member. It's completely free. You know what I mean? Give your email, we'll keep in touch with you. It's www.failforward, FAIL, the number 4, WARD.com.
And you said it's for men only, right? No women?
It's targeting men. I will say that's not a forever thing, but yes, I have a heart for other men, and I'm a married man. So it just makes it a little bit easier for me to, really serve in that capacity where my heart is after. And, I think it has the greatest need. Women ask for help. You feel me?
Yeah,
So,
they do. Yeah, they
you
do.
know,
They
so
good on that one.
yeah, we speaking as men, right? Like it's not just you and me, right? And also you can find me online. Look, I'm on Instagram at The Real Fail Forward. I haven't started the podcast yet, but it's the same handle on YouTube, and then on TikTok it's the same at The Real Fail Forward. And then everything is spelled as you would expect, except for Fail Forward, and because it has a number 4 in the middle of it. And then you can email me, info@failforward.com. And everything on the website, you can reach me that way. That's the most central way. But I'm building out the brotherhood. If you go to my website, there's a hamburger tab in the top right, and I'm dropping some crumbs. It's not completely built out yet, but I like to add things beforehand, and it'll walk you through who it's for, who it's not. I'm looking to build the most affordable coaching platform for young men, to encourage them and give them permission to invest in themselves, brother. That's what I want. Formal education is one thing, but that's not the preparation, for real life, especially for minority men, in my mind. You know what I mean? So we're building out a community on the back end that's going to be school for young men. And that's as we work alongside executives and managers and leaders to make sure they're leading from a place where they're not penalizing failure and stunting the growth of their company, and their leadership because of it. So lots to come on that. So thanks for letting me walk through that.
Well, I appreciate you, James, for coming on here. I know it's early, but I do thank you for coming on here, being vulnerable. We like our guests to be vulnerable because it helps other men to know that they're not going along. They're not going through something alone, and other people can relate to them. So I do appreciate you. And if you ever want to come back on, eventually next year will be our last season, season 5. So we might have a get together with some of the guests from the past episodes to come
Mhm.
on. So, I will keep you in touch with that. If we do have a, goodbye party, I would like you to be included in that because you have good energy. And it really radiates through the screen, so.
Well, I appreciate that. That sounds amazing. Definitely let me know. I want to leave you with one quote right before
Okay.
you close out. And this is something that I see on people's phone screens in the future. I see it on their mirrors in the bathroom. I see it on their remarkables. I see it as a reminder for them to just fly. And it is everyone fails, winners fail forward.
Ain't that your slogan?
Yeah.
To some degree.
Yeah. And so I want to see more men win. And
Yes.
so I'm encouraging more men to be willing to fail forward. So thank you.
All right. Well, I gotta go, but it's been really a pleasure talking to you, and I wish you nothing but success. And if men, happen to reach out through me, I will give them your information because it takes a village to help people. Like I'm
Amen.
no one man of my own. I don't have all the answers, so I look for my guests is to kind of take on some of that burden of all those messages that we get to kind of help other people. If we're not the good fit for them, then I know it's going to be multitude of guesses that they'll be able to reach out to. But I'll leave you on that, and you have a good day, James.
Thank you, brother. Same to you. Thank
All
you,
right,
Ron.
all right, take care, man.
You too. Peace.